Hey, what's up, you guys? Welcome back to the Unlock Your Freedom podcast. Super pumped to learn with and from Jay Worthy today. Jay's a professional adventurer. Jay's also a podcast host of the 28 Summers podcast and the co-host of the new Man Alive podcast, among many other things. But I'll let you guys hear it from the expert. Jay, what's going on, man? Welcome.
Hey Kevin, how you doing, brother? I'm doing good, thank you.
Yeah, doing super. I'm really grateful that you took time out to share with us today. Could you enlighten everybody a little bit more on who you be and how you like to serve?
Yeah, of course. Well, it's a really good question as well because I typically get asked this question. I find in modern society, we typically ask people like what the first question we ask people when we meet them is like, what do you do for a living? And I think it's a really interesting question. So I tend not to give the obvious answer because I think in modern society, we typically kind of identify ourselves by how we make money. And it's kind of like a really weird way of introducing yourself because it doesn't necessarily define you. I think in most cases it doesn't. So, in the past I would have said, oh, I'm an executive in a big company or, a CEO or whatever. Whereas today I would say to you, yeah, I'm an adventurer, I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a researcher, a lifelong student, and that those things define me because they are where I'm most passionate and most happy. It's where my heart sings. There's not necessarily any of those things that help me make money, unfortunately, but that's okay because what we do to make money doesn't define us. It's like what we do in our time that makes our heart sing. So I always love to ask people, when I meet them at a barbecue or at some kind of event, like, what do you do that makes your heart vibrate? Like, I think that's such a cool question to ask somebody, and it normally gets some weird looks. Like people are like, "What the hell are you asking
Yeah.
me?" But it's a cool question because you really get to know people. So for me, those things like being outdoors, like being connected with nature and spending time with my wife and my family, my children, I've got 5 beautiful children, is really what makes me happy and makes my heart sing.
Yeah, I think that's probably some of the most profound advice right there on just really figuring out what you want to spend your time doing. And I
Right.
think a lot of people get it backwards when they're trying to process information, right? They go from the top down, like start with the
Yeah.
mind and that logical and reasonable part, and it stops there. And it has, that gives you limits. And, you can live a life with no limits, but you need to start with the heart or even the gut. And, use that mind for reason and logic. It's really good for that, but I don't need it all the time.
Yeah. That's
So,
right, man.
talk to me about living adventurously because like we all know what the word adventure means, so to speak. But
Yeah.
that really intrigued me when I saw that because I love adventure of any kind.
Yeah. And I think we have this kind of stereotypical point of view of what adventure is, right? And who adventurers are. And, might even not identify as an adventurer and say, hey, I'm an adventurer. You introduced me as one, which I absolutely love. Because I think anybody who likes to live adventurously is an adventurer and they don't need to be climbing huge mountains or trekking jungles. So, I'm definitely all about encouraging just everyday folks to look for the adventure in everyday life. And for me, it's always about, are we stuck in autopilot? And I'm sure that plenty of your listeners listening in have experienced throughout their lifetimes when they can't remember what they did last week. Like somebody says to them, tell me one memorable thing that you did last week. And they're really thinking hard. I mean, maybe you right now, like, can you remember something that you did really memorable last week? And I always say to people, if you can't, it's okay. It's actually quite normal. But also that's a challenge to yourself to say, can I start living my life in a way that I am piecing together a series of really memorable moments such that, when the end inevitably comes, I can look back on a really filled life of amazing experiences and a life well lived. And I come from this corporate background where I spent a ton of time and still spend a good deal of time working in businesses. And if you're not careful, you can just get stuck in the daily grind, man, living this kind of containerized life where you go from your bedroom to your kitchen to your car to your office to the shopping mall or the grocery store, and you just move from one container to the next and you're never really kind of experiencing life. Is a bit like being stuck in the matrix, right? And we're all living that life. And so for me, I think it's, the message that I always want to try and share with the world, and not because I feel like I should be kind of profoundly speaking at people and telling them how to live their life, but more because it fundamentally changed my own life. I was in a really dark place, was getting to a period of acute depression, as a result of losing my job. And I just didn't know what to do. I didn't know who to turn to. And as I started to kind of heal myself through the power of nature, I realized that I was just stuck in autopilot, that I was just, living this kind of rat race type life. And I needed to get out of that and start really building more memorable experiences back into my life.
So for anybody that, that really resonates with kind of the, stuck, the low point, whatever it may look like, whether it's depression or, maybe an extreme anxiety, just really feeling stuck. And gosh, I've been there. It's so hard. It's like, I want more, but I have no idea how to get to that. And so what's like the first, kind of step you would suggest somebody do to just create some clarity around what better would even look like, or moving towards it?
Yeah, one of the most, I think, profound things that I realized, when I was younger, I'm embarrassed to say, but also honestly and authentically saying that I didn't really understand depression or anxiety. I had never suffered with it myself, and I knew people that had. And I was one of these kind of glasses half full kind of guys, just always running at the world hard. And if I got knocked down, I'd get back up. And I just didn't understand it. And it took, personal experience to really understand it and realize it. And I think it comes in all shapes and sizes. It catches us when we're least expecting it. Also, depression and anxiety, have no bearing on other parts of your life. So you can be deliriously happy with, your family or your partner, but you may really struggle in one part of your life, and that can become all consuming. So I'd say for anybody who suffers with those things, as I did, one of the best things I think people can do is to get outdoors. So I'm currently just writing my thesis for a master's in outdoor education and adventure, and my theme of study is around the mental health benefits of being outdoors. And fundamentally, without being too cliche, the science is in, right? The science is pretty clear. The literature base tells us that since the 1980s, there's been an abundance of research demonstrating that time in nature heals you. And I think most people would get that, right? Like if you say to people, you go and stand in a national park or at the beach or in an area of outstanding national beauty, you would say, yeah, I feel great, but you don't quite know why. And there's a lot of research that would point to the rejuvenating qualities of being out in nature. And yet knowing that and doing something about it are often very different. So this idea of like being stuck in a containerized life where you go, if that resonated with people listening, one of the things that I always recommend is just building some time outdoors into your day. And then quite quickly, what you tend to find is people say, I just don't have enough time for that. I'm too busy. And I always like to talk about a piece of research back in, the mid 2010s that was a meta-analysis looking at different research that had been conducted onto like the dose response of nature. So the idea here was trying to figure out, okay, this nature thing is pretty cool. It's good for us, but like how much of it do we really need to feel good? Like how much of this stuff should I get? And fundamentally what the research demonstrated was the majority of the benefit you get from being outdoors, you get within the first 5 minutes. So even the most busy people whose agendas are absolutely stacked, just like step outside. Even if you live in an urban environment and there's not a lot of the green stuff near you, there are ways that you can get outside and get connected with the elements and kind of step away from the digital life for a moment. And there is really strong evidence to show that can rejuvenate you. And it's my belief that when you get out, you start to create space to think, and that helps you start to process some of those difficult emotions you're dealing with.
Yeah, wow, there was so much cool stuff in what you just said. I love that the first 5 minutes gives you, I can't remember how you said it, but the first five, say that again, actually, about the first.
It gives you
minutes.
like you get the majority of the rejuvenating benefit in the first 5 minutes. So it's not to say that, 3 hours in nature isn't good for you. Of course, it absolutely is. But in this kind of time poor society, 5 minutes is enough. 5 minutes is enough to say to your body, okay, let's kind of ground ourselves, get reconnected with the elements. And it's quite rare for us to do that as well. Like we're so busy, we run, we've always got our phone in our pocket, we're running to the car, we're picking up the kids or running to a meeting. How often do we actually take 5 minutes just to stand or walk in an area of kind of natural beauty and actually really be present? Looking at the things that we can see, listening to the things that we can hear, smelling the things that we can smell, and like being really present in the place.
Yeah, dude, that's so powerful. I kind of feel like I'm talking to myself, except maybe a more intuitive, smarter version. So really cool. I was, thinking about this thing, what exactly we're talking about right now, like walking and just being really aware this morning. There's a great lake by my house. I take my dog to in the morning. It's really quiet and just it's so beautiful out there. And just making myself, be very intentional about being present too. Just not looking at my phone, not listening to stuff. And like, man, there's like miracles everywhere, like just
Oh my
life is a
God.
miracle. Trees are miracles, the birds, the sun
Yeah.
comes up every day. It's a miracle. And I think it's so important that we focus on what we do want, because whatever I focus on, that's what I create more of in my life. And if I'm focusing on miracles,
Yeah.
it's not like woo woo, I live on a unicorn ranch. It's like, hey, miracles happen in the mind that's ready for it. It's not going to happen if I'm blocking it with, stress and frustration.
Yeah, I love that you said that as well, because I believe in that as well. It's so easy to kind of believe that people have these insta perfect lives, and it's just it's not healthy to aspire to that. I think the reality is life has its ups and downs. Sometimes it's really hard. Sometimes you feel really tired. Sometimes you just feel a bit overwhelmed or a bit unsure, uncertain, or confused, or frustrated. There are all these emotions, and this broad spectrum of human emotions is what makes humans so unique. Sometimes it can be our undoing. And so I love that you said that there's ups and downs. We don't live this unicorn life. And so that's why I love nature, because to your point, like the sunrise, you mentioned it yourself, the sun comes up, the sun goes down. I kind of liken that to, it's like 2 showings of a movie every day for the rest of your life. It's like the best movie in town. It's like the best movie in town. Every morning, I guarantee the sun's going to come up, and then the sun's going to go down at the end of the night. So remember that showing is there. You don't have to have a ticket. It's free. Find a way to get outside and then be present. And if people are like me, by the way, I really struggle to kind of be present and do mindful walking or, meditation of any sort, because I got this busy mind and just I'm like restless all the time. One of the tactics that people can use, which I really like, is this idea of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So as you're walking in a place of natural beauty, if you're outdoors or you're trying to kind of reconnect or get away from something that's stressing you, think about 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So 5 things that you can see, 4 things that you can touch, 3 things that you can smell, right? 2 things that you can hear, and then 1 thing that you can touch. So that you can taste. I'm sorry. I screwed it up. 1 thing that you can taste.
Yeah.
And the taste thing is like weird. Like I don't want people going out there and licking trees or something. The taste thing is like, what is the taste that you have in your mouth when you look at that beautiful waterfall or that great, amazing oak tree or whatever it is?
Yeah, that's really cool. That's one of the things I've actually suggested to people. I'm like, you bring awareness to the present by using your senses.
Right.
Like, what do I see? What do I smell? What do I what kind of feel? And I really like the way that you just shared it. That's a really cool way to go way deeper on it. And the taste is the one that I always struggle with the most. Right?
Yeah.
It's like, what spit? I don't know. What do I taste right now?
Yeah.
But that's beautiful, man. I mean, it sounds like work-life balance, right? I really don't. I'm always leery to use that phrase because I think it confuses people, and me in the past for sure. It's like, oh, does that mean like work half the time and play half the time? And could you maybe talk about what your perspective is when it comes to work-life balance?
Yeah, I think it's a really great question. I mean, first and foremost, I think it's about trying to approach your life intentionally, as we talked about, and trying to identify opportunities to have memorable experiences, which can come at work. They can come during the work day or with work colleagues or at the work environment. But if we're not careful, we get stuck in that autopilot. And so that's when I think it can be dangerous, that work can start to kind of permeate every part of our life. And then it starts to have a really negative impact on our family and our loved ones and our mood and generally our energy levels. So, I think that when I talk about work-life balance, I know it is a bit of a cliched expression, but equally everybody kind of broadly understands what I mean by that, which is like, don't work so hard that you forget to live, right? That and the way that I always like to kind of articulate this or illustrate this is if you're driving down like a highway and you're in the fast lane and you're going like whatever the speed limit is, because we wouldn't break the speed limit, but going as fast as you can in the fast lane, and everything going past your window is going past in a blur, and you're not concentrating, you're concentrating on the road ahead. And it's good to be goal orientated and have a vision, and we're just peppered with this content all around us that tells us we've got to get up and rise and grind and work hard. And I get it, and I like the idea that people are going to work hard and better themselves. But I also, as I've got older and more reflective, believe that it's important to slow down and enjoy the view. And the other way that I say this is, if you move from the fast lane into the slow lane, everything starts to come into focus, right? You can start to see the things that are going past you, and you might see things that you would otherwise have missed that are really powerful and important to you. You might see people that need help, or you might see things you want to go and explore. And so sometimes it's really important for us to slow down. So when I talk about work-life balance, I'm really talking about slowing down every so often and being present and intentional and looking for those opportunities to kind of restore our energy.
And so how does someone build, a plan to move towards this? Because if, I just tell myself I want more work-life balance, and that's a subjective, and if I've never done it, it's hard for me to get there, of course.
Yeah.
So how do you build that out?
I think first and foremost, you've got to have a why. Probably you and lots of other people listening have listened and read Simon Sinek Start with the Why. I think it's really important to know why you're doing something, right? And for me, if you've been to my website and see my podcast, 28 Summers, it's kind of an odd name. People might not be sure, but the story is actually, I think, really powerful and does a nice job of articulating my kind of why. I was, in this pretty dark place, feeling like other people kind of owned my day, not really feeling like I was committed to self-care. And I was watching a podcast with a guy called Tom Bilyeu. He was interviewing an author, an entrepreneur called Jesse Itzler, who wrote a great book called Living with a Seal. And Tom said to Jesse, why are you're 50 years old. Why are you so energetic? Where does this thirst for winning the week and living every single moment, where does it come from? And Jesse said something that completely stopped me in my tracks. He said, you know what? I turned 50 this year. The average life expectancy of a male in the United States is 78. So I got 28 summers left. And I was like, holy shit. That just completely, that Hollywood moment where something just stops you in your tracks. And it sounds utterly cliched, but totally true. I was like, wait. I rewound the podcast and I was like, that is what I've been grappling with. I think at the time I must have been just turned 40, right? I was a executive in $1 billion company. I was grinding hard, but I something wasn't right, and I knew it wasn't right, but I didn't quite know what. And it was that I'm probably halfway, and I don't know whether I filled my life with the right experiences. And that set me on a path of, okay, there's this kind of notional, became fixated with this idea that there was this notional kind of atomic clock ticking down, and it had my name above it. It said Jay Worthy above it, and it was ticking down. And one day it was going to hit zero, and that's me. That's my time on this kind of ball of earth flying through space, right? And that would be me done. And that sounds really morbid, but actually it was the opposite for me. It was really powerful moment, because I was like, okay, but if I knew what that clock said, would I live my life differently? If I knew it had 19 days left? And of course the answer was yes. There were certain things that I would deprioritize. I wouldn't go to that boring 2-hour meeting where I knew I wasn't going to get any value out of it. Right. I wouldn't necessarily go and spend 2 hours queuing at the post office to post something. I would start to fill my life with things that mattered, because I wanted memories. I wanted people around me to have great memories with me. And then I became totally fixated with the idea that I should just do that anyway, even if I didn't know. And that's ultimately, it's a really simple concept, but that 28 Summers philosophy is my guiding principle. I think for everybody listening, it's being really clear on, why do you want to start to kind of buck the autopilot? Why do you want to start to get out of this containerized life? And what is it about connecting with nature that you believe will be really powerful for you? And then continue to remind yourself of that, because it's easy to go out, and spend some time in a beautiful natural place, on a summer morning when it's warm or whatever, but it gets hard when it's cold and, and damp and dark, but it's still just as therapeutic, right? So we've got to make sure that we're really clear on our why, so that we continue to do it even when it gets hard.
Yeah, I love that you started with that, like you mentioned Simon Sinek's book, and it's almost been said so much that it's so familiar, people just ignore it. Yeah, I know my why. Okay, do you know, or do you understand? I feel like there's a difference there, do you truly understand on a deep fundamental level, why this drives you? why you're going to
Right.
get up when it's hard. And like, that's purpose, right? And
Yeah.
so one of the, really powerful ways that I've helped myself get there, and, a lot of my clients, it's like, start with a passion, right? Like, what do you want?
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
then how are you mixing generosity into that? That's really how I got to the why. It's like, okay, here's what I want. And, this is why it matters. This is how I serve the community, the world. And
Yeah. I
so
love that.
when you're working with, like, I know you work with a lot of executives, obviously,
Yep.
as a lead, executive of a large company, that's a big part of what you do. So serving leaders, which is awesome because, leaders are really able to scale their impact through others.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd love to know how you just help when you maybe get somebody who's not on point with their passion and purpose, how you help them just kind of get back to aligned with, that powerful part of them, that really unlimited part.
Yeah, I think I love the question. And I think for me, part of the service that I believe I can offer to others, having, been in these big jobs, you're CEO of a $1 billion company, VP in a Fortune 500 organization. Like, I understand pressure, I understand stress and workload, and I've been, on the wrong side of that many, many, many times in my career. So I totally get it. And I think that level of empathy with somebody to say, look, I understand what you're grappling with. You got kids, you find it hard to fit this stuff in. I got 5, I get it, So I think that level of empathy is really important. And then what I typically do, which is unsurprising based on the conversation we've had so far, is I'll normally just want to get people outdoors. I feel like there's 2 elements of getting out to nature that are really, really powerful that I always want to help people do. The first is just getting outside and getting away from technology. And I'm not one of these guys that's a full-on technophobe. I love gadgets, and I think that technology has a really important role to play in modern life, and it's not going away, right? So I'm one of these guys that embraces it. I'm not pushing it away, but I also think we have to be disciplined with our use of technology, and that's where technology has got to a bad place in our lives, is it's become so all consuming and always on that we don't have any boundaries. So I tend to work with people to kind of create those boundaries, create that space to get outdoors. And then getting outdoors, one of the things that I really love to say to people is get high, which always kind of gets a bit of a laugh. But what I mean by that is get up to a high vantage point, whatever you're comfortable with. Is it climbing a tree, which most of us haven't done since we were a child? Or is it, top of a building that's in our neighborhood? Or is it climbing a hill or a mountain, a peak of some description? But normally getting high gives you a totally new perspective. And in that moment, you start to create some space to think. And that is where, we start to ask the important questions. Okay, what matters to you? What are you feeling today? What are the emotions that are overwhelming in your life today, good and bad? Let's talk about those. What feelings do you want going forward? Let's talk about those. And let's talk about how to get them and why you want them and why that matters to you. And for the most part, it's different with everybody, but a lot of the time it does often center around this idea that work has become all consuming. And a lot of folks that I speak to have really lost the ability, or in some cases, maybe even never had the ability to manage and mediate stress, right? And that often comes down to kind of task prioritization.
Yeah, that right there, I think you just like said it so casually, but that was a really powerful comment, especially at the end. With the stress, it's not a consequence of the work; it's a result of the inability that we have to manage our body and our energy and our thoughts and our
Yeah,
emotions and our chemistry because of all that. And like
yeah,
that's really powerful, man. Like when you take somebody on, any kind of outdoor adventure, number one, like it's so wonderful because you're instantly more aware. Like you said, the first 5 minutes you get the benefit. That's why like sunsets are so powerful or sunrises. It's like you just have this awesome awareness that there's so much more than me. And I'm sure you probably studied it a lot. I love to study like flow and peak states and stuff like that. And sunrises and
right.
sunsets can put you in flow. It's like it's not always an
Yep.
action. And you know what I'm talking about
I
when
totally.
if you want to go deeper on that, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I think so. I think that well, two things. First of all, like the cycles of the sun, so sunrise and sunset, I think is really powerful. And if you kind of think philosophically about humans since the dawn of time, that's something that we share. There's so many things that are different about our lives to our early ancestors, but one thing that is almost identical today to how it was, thousands of years ago, is the sun rising and setting over the land, and the power and the emotion that elicits with us. And so I think in our early ancestors, there was so much awe of that kind of show that was put on every day that people there was reverence, right? They would worship the sun, and the sun had power to them. We've become a bit complacent. We see it and we think it's beautiful, but we just kind of go about our day. We might be driving in the car or whatever, sat in our office or at home, and we see the sunsets. We might comment that it's beautiful, but do we really stop to experience it? And I think you're right. I think there's real flow to be had there. And there's, again, some really interesting literature on that, the connection with nature. And when we really get in tune with nature and see ourselves as part of nature rather than separate to it, there's some really powerful consequences to that. So yeah, I really believe in that idea that we should get kind of deeply connected with nature. And then one of the things that I talk a lot to people about is this idea that we've got really busy lives. So I'm a realist, right? I'm not one of these kind of floaty guys that saying, oh, we should all go and kind of lie in a field for 3 hours and go and take 3 months off to hike the Pacific Crest Trail. Like, I know we all want to do those things, but it's not always practical or possible with our lives. And so I talk quite a lot about micro doses of nature and micro doses of adventure. There's a really cool author and adventurer in the UK called Alistair Humphreys, and he coined this term called micro adventures. And I think that applies really nicely to other parts of well-being as well. So like micro wellness and micro doses of nature. So that 5 minutes I talked about earlier is like, okay, you're busy, but could you take 5 minutes outside? Could you eat your breakfast and your dinner outside? Could you watch the sunrise and the sunset on the same day? Not every day, but some days. Like, really be intentional about, okay, today I'm going to watch the sunrise and be present, and then I'm going to watch it set on the same day. And there's probably quite a lot of people listening now would be like, oh my God, like that's such a simple concept, but I can't remember the last time I ever intentionally watched the sunrise and sunset on the same day. And I think that's a really powerful concept.
Oh my gosh, yes. I feel like it, resets you to the rhythm of life, the rhythm of nature. I mean, that's amazing. So I have a question, at your nature comment. So what about like bringing nature indoors, and just off the top of my head, obviously house plants or something like that, which I think always made me feel great. But like, I think water is always really helpful for me. Like, even if it's not, taking a shower is great because I feel very cleansed, like on it, physical, soul, spiritual level, or whatever, right? But and even just washing my hands, get water on my hands or my face really helps. But like anything around bringing nature indoors that you could speak to?
Yeah, it's a great question because, for a lot of people, just getting outside is really difficult. I mean, I do like this idea of kind of adventure before work. So this idea that if we're really purposeful in the mornings, we could find time to get out and be adventurous and live adventurously, even before we sit down at our desk. And there's lots of great ideas and tips that I could give people. But to the extent that you can't do that and you want to try and bring nature to you, there are definitely options. I mean, houseplants is really a good option. Getting sunlight on your face early in the morning has been demonstrated by researchers to have a restorative benefits for humans. So preferably you do that outside, but could you do that at a window? Yeah, for sure. Get the sun on your face and feel that benefit early on when you wake up. One of the things that I've developed is something called the morning menu. So I felt for a long time as an busy parent, that kind of everybody else owned my morning and I didn't. And even if they had the best of intentions, they were setting the mood for my day, which wasn't always great. And so one of the things that I set about doing was trying to kind of hack my morning. But I found that a lot of the stuff that existed, probably people have read the 5 a.m. Club and, really thought about their morning routines. And there's some good stuff there. But for me, it was very regimented. And it was also required me to get up very early every single day. And whilst for a period of time in my life, that was something I could do, it's not always been the case. So the morning menu is like this idea that there are certain things that you might need to feel restored in the morning. And nature is one of them. And I talk a lot about that because I feel so passionately about it. But other things might be, cold exposure, right? So cold ice baths, or it could be meditation, or it could be journaling, or it could be mobility and exercise. It could be drawing. It could even be cooking. Like there could be so many things that you might do that empower you and make you feel restored. But trying to do all of them every single day is like so difficult to do. It's only for those like insta perfect influencers. So I always say, like, use the morning menu and consider it like, and rather than telling you here's a recipe that you've got to use every day for your life, the morning menu is about giving you a list of ingredients and letting you create your own recipe every single day. So check in with yourself, do 2 minutes of breath work, really focus on the breath, think about how you're feeling, check in with your body and your mind and say, okay, I'm tired today and I'm confused. Okay, tired and confused. Well, let's go for a walk in nature to energize ourselves, and let's do some journaling to process that confusion. If the next day I'm feeling stiff and sore, well, let's do an ice bath and some mobility. It doesn't have to be the same thing every day. And I think, again, that's a really exciting proposition for people to say, okay, my morning routine can be fluid and it can be based on how I'm feeling or how much time I have, but at least I always try and get something in.
Yeah, and I think I love that, a big part of what you just shared is about having grace for yourself too. It's not about being, the most perfect regimented morning person. It's about doing what feels right for you, at the time. And that, that's humility too. It's right. I don't have all the right answers, but I'm open to a better way. And I used to do it the other way. I was super rigid, and if I didn't hit it perfectly,
Right.
which I rarely did, I was like down on myself. So I was really taking away all the benefit that I was probably creating. And that's
It was exactly the same for me. I was like that. I was like this real regimented. I had this thing that I had to do every morning. And to be fair, it did work for a period of time, but then it stopped. So it worked until it didn't. And then when it stopped
right.
working, I basically, that's the problem with this idea of a streak, right? If you're doing something every single day, eventually you might not do it. And then when you don't, you just beat yourself up and you get down on yourself, and it can be a real energy killer. And so, level of self-talk is often pretty deprecating, and we'd tend to be crueler to ourselves than we would be to anybody else. So that idea of self-care and self-kindness is what led me to the idea of the morning menu versus this regimented routine. It was about being kind to myself and saying, okay, today I don't have 30 minutes where I can really focus on myself, but could I take 5 before the day really gets going? Yeah, I can definitely do that. Okay, what do I need the most? What is the thing? I know it's a bit of a cliche when I talk about the menu, but it is the metaphorical equivalent of, okay, I can't cook myself a really nice, finely balanced breakfast this morning, but I want to take something. So what can I grab on the go that's going to, fuel me, but it's not junk food. It's not going to give me an energy crash later on. Like, what's the one thing I need the most now?
And there's so much good. And there's so much more I want to ask you, but I want to also protect your time. I want to talk a little bit more here before I have a little fire round at the end, where I like to just ask the same questions, because really it's for the folks listening, but I really love to learn from brilliant people like you. But before we get to that, I know you, like we talked about, you work with a lot of executives and different types of leaders. Somebody's listening who maybe starts resonating with this and they want to connect with you. You've got a great website that I've been looking through for the past week or two, 28summers.com. It's the number 28, then summers.com. And what's your favorite type of people to work with, inside that executive and leadership space? Like, what's the requirements for entry?
Yeah, the requirements for entry are people that are feeling kind of broadly a little overwhelmed. So there's a lot on their plate, a lot of conflicting priorities that mean a lot to them, and they're struggling to figure out how to kind of compartmentalize them and stack them up alongside each other. And that typically then translates to people who are kind of in that middle-aged bucket. Quite often they're parents, and very often they've deprioritized their own kind of personal care for some other cause, whether that's work or whether that's a mission that they have, or whether that's a spouse or children. And so what I love to do, and I'm doing more and more of over time, is just helping people think about those things and start to develop the skills and the tools and the self-care needed to be able to navigate life and care for others. And I know I've used a lot of kind of cliched analogies, but I love this one. When you get on a plane and they tell you the oxygen mask going to drop down, and when it drops down, you need to put yours on first before you help the person next to you, right? And we all kind of just ignore that now because we've all been on planes for so many times, but that's a really powerful metaphor for life. Like, if you don't grab the oxygen mask first, how can you help anybody else? So if we want to serve our children or our spouse or our colleagues, anybody else in our lives, the best thing that we can do is look after ourselves and empower ourselves and be kind to ourselves, because then we will be the best influence on those that we love around us. And I think for a lot of people, that's like a very simple but quite a new concept, this idea that being a servant to others is often about being a better servant to yourself.
Yeah, well, very well said. It's, it's almost like our social responsibility. We've got to take care of ourselves so that we can make, the biggest impact we can make. We were sent here with all these great skills and talents that are unique to us. And, if we're not growing those consistently, then we're not giving as much as we can. And that's not the deal. So very cool. All right. I got a couple of quick questions here, quick answers, and we'll get you on your way so you can go take over the world before lunch, or before lunch here in the States. I think it's a little later for you guys, but pretty simple question here, but maybe not easy answer. What's your best or favorite piece of mindset advice to share with somebody?
I think the best piece of mindset advice is probably really, really focus on checking in with yourself in the mornings. So the first thing you do when you wake up is focus on the breath for 2 to 3 minutes, and then record in a journal of some sort how you're feeling. And it's like the equivalent of, if you live with somebody that you love, unconditionally, you always ask them how they're doing, but we often forget to ask ourselves how we're doing, right? So it's just, if I could give people one piece of mindful advice, it's not because I think I know everything. I certainly don't. I'm still learning every single day. But the thing that's been most transformational for me in my own life has been learning to check in with myself first thing in the morning.
Oh, yeah, very good. All right. What's something in your life, in addition to being out in nature and your family, what's something else that's non-negotiable?
Non-negotiable is activity and exercise. I think our bodies are built to move, and I think that when we become sedentary, we become containerized. When we become containerized, we get unwell, and it's really hard to buck that trend. And I think activity and exercise is one of the things that gets us out of the box into the great outdoors.
What's a favorite book to read, recommend, or give away?
Probably most recently favorite book would be a book called Losing Eden, by an author called Lucy Jones. And it's about this notion that we are forgetting to teach our children and ourselves about how important nature is to keep us balanced and healthy.
Second person to recommend that in the past 3 weeks. So
it's a really great book.
Yeah, definitely going to check that out. All right. If you could get one message out to everybody in the world, what would that be?
Well, I guess it's not going to be a surprise, right? It's that nature heals us.
Yeah.
Nature heals us. Get outside and you will get well.
What does freedom mean to you?
I think that one for sure is freedom is about not being stuck in autopilot. So pursuing more of what makes you happy and makes your heart sing, and being a really positive influence on the other people in your life as a result of it.
Yeah. All right. Last question. We touched on it a little bit, but I want to make sure everybody knows, where can people go to learn more about you?
Yeah, thank you. So 28summers.com. So the number 2, the number 8, summers.com is the website. I'm on Instagram most actively, and that's at One Day Adventurer. And then you can email me, jay@28summers.com.
Yeah, you guys would be all over that if it was y'all. If he spoke to you, Jay's a really cool dude, man. The real deal, just really doing some cool things. And sounds like he'll take you anywhere you want to go. So if you're ready for a change, seems like this might be your guy. Thank you guys for being here till the end. We love it that you made it this far with us. So obviously, or hopefully you found some value. And if that's the case, share it out with somebody you think that might benefit from what Jay has to share. Well, Jay, hey, thanks again, man. I really, really appreciate you sharing your genius with us today.
Oh, it's so kind of you. Thank you so much for giving me the time. It was great to meet you.
Yeah, you as well. Alrighty, you guys. See y'all next time.